There we go. I think I'm back. Right, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. Is everybody ready?
Ready.
Okay, all right, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful show. We are live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome everybody to our Npu Winter Advocacy Family Boot Camp, brought to you by the National Parents Union. Our host today is going to be Christina Lasseter. Christina is a proud mother of 4 and an excited grandmother of 3, a San Diego, California native who is intimately concerned about the well-being of children and families. She first started working in early childhood education while attending the University of San Diego for pre-law school. She developed a deeper concern about how systems impact communities. Ending her work in the school district with special education, and upon graduating with a BA in political science, she decided to further her education, going on to earn her master's in business administration. Pursuing the right for children, she served as a civil rights activist in education and is now the director of policy and legislation for the National Parents Union. So we want to welcome Christina, and Maritza is going to kind of tell you guys a little bit more about National Parents Union, and then we will get started.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Maritza. Oh yes, I'm off mute. My name is Maritza Guridy, Pennsylvania delegate for the National Parents Union. The National Parents Union develops a new narrative that is inclusive of families from a wide variety of perspectives and that unites parents of color, low-income parents, special needs parents, single mothers and fathers, grandparents, formerly incarcerated parents, and parents in recovery with traditionally represented parent voices to join a vibrant coalition that disrupts the traditional role of parent voice in policy spaces that directly impact our children. National Parents Union mission and vision. The mission of National Parents Union is to support parents who have lived experience and are authentic voices, advocates, and organizers who engage, educate, and empower families neighborhood by neighborhood across the United States. Parents trust and accept that education is the great equalizer, and school systems of every type must be held accountable for meeting the promise of education for all students, that each student has equitable access to opportunity to launch into a successful future. Npu Beliefs. We believe our children should always be at the core of our agenda in every decision. We believe that there should be liberation, justice, and equity in education for all children. We believe education systems must be transformed to eradicate generational institutions of oppression. We believe families have a powerful voice that should influence educational and political policies and practices at the local, state, and national level. We believe in order to effect change and strengthen families, we must provide them with the resources and opportunities to develop their talents and share best practices. Please make sure that you, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm going to talk now. Sorry.
Go ahead, honey.
We added a new slide. So make sure that you have the following apps or tabs. So if you have your phone, like if you're on the computer and you have a phone or a tablet, it's going to be helpful. We're going to play an interactive game, kind of like a quiz game called Kahoot. So you'll go to your app store or however you get your apps, find Kahoot. And that's what you're going to put on your phone or tablet, or you can split your screen, right, and add a second tab. So you have your Zoom on one tab and Kahoot on another tab. So you're ready to go when that comes up. The other thing that is helpful is Jamboard. That's going to be how we're going to be kind of discussing and interacting together, is using this platform. That you will just need another tab on your computer. That's the easiest thing, because I'm going to put the link in the chat when that comes up. So you'll copy and paste that link in the chat board and put it in the Jamboard where it asks you for it. So again, you're going to want a Zoom tab, a Kahoot tab, and a Jamboard tab. And I'll put those in the chat.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maritza and Shea, for giving those announcements. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So excited to start this boot camp. And so I wanted to give you an idea of how our time was going to go together. Here you can see that we will, we already did these. And so we'll start with the reflection. There will be guided instruction, discussion using Jamboard, another section of guided instruction, and then we'll have our power up and responsibility, and then a Q&A session, okay? And so what do I expect to happen during this time? I expect that after this class, you will understand the US government system hierarchy and the purpose of separation of powers. Also, you will be able to realize why your continued engagement with elected representatives is important. So here's a reflection that I want to start with. We will be using James Madison Federalist Paper 51, which did establish a lot of the Constitution and what we see. We're going to dive into that. And we will also be talking about how Paper 51 did establish separation of powers, various branches of government, and also checks and balances, which is similar separation of powers, right? And so looking at this reflection, you can see that it was written by James Madison. I put that at the bottom. You can definitely go and check to see exactly what he wrote. But here is a piece. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place. It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices should be necessary to control the abuses of government. But what is government itself? But the greatest of all reflections on human nature. If men were angels, no government will be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government will be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. A dependence on the people is no doubt the primary control on the government. But experience has taught mankind the necessity of auxiliary precautions. Okay, so that is our reflection out of Federalist Paper 51. We're going to be going through Federalist Paper 51 and highlighting certain sections. So we're going to start the guided instruction. And what I want to do is go, first we're going to talk about, you hear these terms that are brought up like federalist, you know, federalism. What exactly does that mean, right? And so I thought it would be an interesting way to pose the question about federalists and federalism by saying what you would have been had you, during that time, you would have been considered a federalist if you supported the Constitution and a stronger national republic. You were concerned with the preservation of liberty. I think we're all concerned with the preservation of our individual liberties at the very least, right? And those of others. You shared the idea of a proper form of government with like-minded individuals. And you believe that a large national, and that should say government, sorry, is necessary to create a more perfect union by improving the relationship among the states. And as you can see right here in this picture, you see that federalism is dealing with national and state and somewhat government local, okay? So let's go to the next slide. All right, so before we really dissect this paragraph, I want to go straight to the source where the Federalist paper is.
And here you can see the Federalist paper. Number 51, you can see the date that it was published. And we'll go down and I'm going to begin to read it. Okay, so this is James Madison's, what I would consider his op-ed. If we were talking about like op-eds or articles or opinion posts or things like that, I would call this James Madison's op-ed. And so to the people of the state of New York, okay, to what expedient then shall we finally resort for maintaining in practice the necessary partition of power among the several departments? And let me back up real quick. Before we start to dive in and section this off to understand more about the US government and checks and balances and separation of powers, I wanted you guys to have the background document and background information. And so that's why I am gonna take the time to read this document, and then we'll dive into dissecting it piece by piece. It's always important to have background information and to read and understand things in context, okay? So we stopped at the necessary partition of power among the several departments as laid down in the Constitution. The only answer that can be given is that as all these exterior provisions are found to be inadequate, the defect must be supplied by so contriving the interior structure of the government as that its several constituent parts may be by their mutual relations be the means of keeping each other in the proper places. Without presuming to undertake a development of this important idea, I will hazard a few general observations. And remember, when he says I, we're talking about James Madison, okay? Which may perhaps place it in clear light and enables us to form a more correct judgment of the principles and structure of the government planned by the convention. In order to lay a due foundation for that separate and distinct exercise of the different powers of government, which to a certain extent is admitted on all hands to be essential to the preservation of liberty, it is evident that each department should have a will of its own and consequently should be so constituted that the members of each should have as little agency as possible in the appointment of the members of the others. Were the principle rigorously adhered to, it would require that all the appointments for the supreme executive, legislative, and judiciary magistracies should be drawn from the same fountain of authority. The people, through channels having no communication whatever with one another. Perhaps such a plan of constructing the several departments would be less difficult in practice than it may be in contemplation appear. Some difficulties, however, and some additional expense would attend to the execution of it. Some deviations, therefore, from the principle must be admitted. In the constitution of the Judiciary Department in particular, it may be expedient to insist rigorously on the principle first, because peculiar qualifications being essential in the members, the primary consideration ought to be to select that mode of choice which best secures these qualifications. Secondly, because the permanent tenure by which the appointments are held in that department must soon destroy all sense of dependence on the authority conferring them. And don't worry if this sounds a little bit confusing or difficult. We're going to be breaking down a lot of the highlights in this piece by piece. Again, I'm giving you the context of what we're working off of, okay? It is equally evident that the members of each department should be as little dependent as possible on those of the others for the emoluments annexed to their offices. Were the executive magistrate or the judges not independent of the legislature in this particular, their dependence in every other would be merely nominal. But the great security against a gradual concentration of The several powers in the same department consists in giving to those who administer each department the necessary constitutional means and personal motives to resist encroachments of the others. The provision for defense must be in this: as in all other cases, be made commensurate to the danger of attack. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place. It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices should be necessary to control the abuses of government. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, and that was a part of the reflection that we just pulled out and read before this entire context in the paper. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this: you must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. A dependence on the people is no doubt the primary control on the government, but experience has taught mankind the necessity of auxiliary precautions. This policy of supplying by opposite and rival interests the defect of better motives might be traced through the whole system of human affairs, private as well as public. We see it particularly displayed in all the subordinate distributions of power, where the constant aim is to divide and arrange the several offices in such a manner as that each may be a check on the other, that the private interest of every individual may be sentinel over the public rights. These interventions of prudence cannot be less requisite in the distribution of the supreme powers of the state, but it is not possible to give each department an equal power of self-defense. In Republican government, the legislative authority necessarily predominates. The remedy for this inconveniency is to divide the legislature into different branches and to render them by different modes of election and different principles of action, as little connected with each other as the nature of their common function and their common dependence on the society will admit. It may be necessary to guard against dangerous encroachments by still further precautions, as the weight of the legislative authority requires that it should be thus divided. The weakness of the executive may require, on the other hand, that it should be fortified. Okay, we're almost done with this one. An absolute negative on the legislature appears at first view to be the natural defense with which the executive magistrate should be armed, but perhaps it would be neither although safe nor alone sufficient. On ordinary occasions, it might not be exerted with the requisite firmness, and on extraordinary occasions, it might be perniciously abuse. May not this defect of an absolute negative be supplied by some qualified connection between the weaker department and the weaker branch of the stronger department, by which the latter may be led to the support of the constitutional rights of the former, without being too much detached from the rights of its own department? If the principles on which these observations are founded be just, as I persuade myself they are, and they be applied as criterion for to the several state constitutions and to the federal constitution, it would be found that if the latter does not perfectly correspond with them, the former are intently less able to bear such a test. There are, moreover, considerations particularly applicable to the federal system of America, which place that system in a very interesting point of view. First, in a single republic, all the power surrendered by the people is submitted to the administration of a single government, and the usurpations are guarded against by a division of the government into distinct and separate departments. In the compound Republic of America, the power surrendered by the people is first divided between the two distinct governments and then portion allotted of each subdivision among distinct and separate departments. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. Second, it is of great importance in a republic not only to guard the society against the oppression of its rulers, but to guard one part of the society against the injustice of the other part. Different interests necessarily exist in different classes of citizens. If a majority be united by a common interest, the rights of the minority will be insecure. Therefore, are but two methods of providing against this evil. The one by creating a will in the community independent of the majority, that is, of the society itself. The other by comprehending in the society so many separate descriptions of citizens as will render an unjust combination of a majority of the whole very improbable, if not impracticable. The first method prevails in all government possessing a hereditary or self-appointed authority. This at best is but a precarious security because a power independent on the society may as well espouse the unjust views of the major as the rightful interest of the minor party, and may possibly be turned against both parties. The second method will be exemplified in the Federal Republic of the United States, whilst all authority in it will be derived from and dependent on the society. The society itself will be broken into so many parts, interests, and classes of citizens that the rights of individuals or the minority will be in little danger from interested combinations of the majority. In a free government, the security for civil rights must be the same as that for religious rights. It consists in the one case in a multiplicity of interests, and in the other in a multiplicity of sects. The degree of security in both cases will depend on the number of interests and sects, and this may be presumed to depend on the extent of country and number of people comprehended under the same government. This view of the subject must particularly recommend a proper federal system to all the sincere and considerate friends of Republican government, since it shows that an exact proportion as the territory of the Union may be formed into more circumscribed confederacies or states, oppressive combinations of the majority will be facilitated. The best security under the Republican form for the rights of every class of citizen will be diminished, and consequently the stability and independence of some members of the government. The only other security must be proportionally increased. Justice in the end, it is the end of civil society. It ever has been and ever will be pursued until it is obtained, or until liberty be lost in the pursuit. In a society under the forms of which the stronger faction can readily unite and oppress the weaker, anarchy may as truly be said to reign as in a state of nature where the weaker individual is not secured against the violence of the stronger. And as in the latter state, even the stronger individuals are prompted by the uncertainty of their condition to submit to a government which may protect the weak as well as themselves. So in the former state will be more powerful factions or parties be gradually induced by a like motive to wish for government which will protect all parties, the weaker as well as the more powerful. Okay, in last paragraph, it can be little doubted that in the state of Rhode Island was separated from the Confederacy and left to itself, the insecurity of rights under the popular form of government within such narrow limits would be displayed by such reiterated oppressions of factious majorities that some power altogether independent of the people would soon be called for by the voice of the very factious. Whole misrule had proved the necessity of it. In the extended Republic of the United States, and among the great variety of interest, parties, and sects, which it embraces a coalition of a majority of the whole society, could seldom take place on any other principles than those of justice and the general good. Whilst there being thus less danger to a minor form that will of a major party, there must be less pretext also to provide for the security of the former by introducing into the government a will not dependent on the latter, or in other words, a will independent of the society itself. It is no less certain that it is important, notwithstanding the contrary opinions which have been entertained, the larger the society, provided it lie within a practical sphere, the more duly capable it will be of self-government. And happily for the Republican cause, the practicable sphere may be carried to a very great extent by a judicious modification and mixture of the federal principle. And you see Publius. All right, so we got through that paper. Give yourself a pat on the back because you just finished going through the whole Federalist paper 51. All right, if you can see the PowerPoint, Shea, can you give me a thumbs up so I can make sure I have all the right screen? Thank you. All right, so now we're back at the PowerPoint. And so I'm gonna break this down. That was a lot, that Federalist paper, but it really is important to understand, like I said, things in context, because then you understand how the Constitution came to be, how the US government system came to be, and how separations of power is very important in establishing that. So here we have the paragraph that we were looking at, which was, to what expedient then shall we finally resort for maintaining and practice the necessary partition? So if you see that word partition of power right there, highlighted, right? We're talking about, you know, partition of power being separation of power, okay? Separation of power and among several branches of government. So here we start to see this paper talking about separations of power, establishing separation of power. Here's where we see it, partition of power. Right here, you can see it is also talking about several constituent parts, right? And those several constituent parts, what that means is several departments, or what we know as branches of government. So it's several constituent parts may, by their mutual relations, by the means of keeping each other in their proper places. So Federalist Paper 51 is solely about separation of power, checks and balances. And there was a question raised at the beginning, to what expedient then, right? And then we see a solution, okay? Then we see a solution, and this establishes constitutionally our government and the separation of powers, checks and balances. Partition of power, separation, several constituent parts, branches of government, departments, okay? So let's look at that, right? If we look at what that did and what that alluded to, we see that right here, okay? The solution, and you can see in quotes, the provision for defense must be in this. As in all other cases, be made commensurate, and I'm gonna have to move this box because I can't see. To the danger of attack, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. So we see a solution to give each branch. So you see right here, the state constitution would be the supreme law of the US, okay? And out of that comes various branches of government. And so in order to make sure that that partition of power is embedded and established, the solution was to create each branch with the ability and the incentive to fiercely guard and protect its power from the other two branches, right? So they have to, each branch from the legislative, executive, and judicial has to fiercely guard and protect its own power from the other two branches, and they do have incentive to do so. We can see the provision for defense must be in this. This is what James Madison wrote to establish this. As in all other cases, be commensurate to the danger of attack, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. James Madison, in his understanding of human nature, right? And we understand human nature, right? Knew that if you give a person power, that person is going to try to take more power without a system of external or internal checks and balances. However, instead of looking at this as a totally negative thing, we can see it as a positive use of this in the branch division, right? So if we're looking at the branch division, each branch will desire to increase its own power. However, when you have all three branches that want to increase their own power, they will also be motivated to protect their own power from the other two branches, okay? This power exchange and protection has a built-in mechanism that ensures no branch will become more powerful than the other. No branch will become more powerful than the other. Oops, I'm sorry. Woo. All right, take it away, Shea. And I have to stop sharing.
Okay. Okay, everybody, now we are going to play a Kahoot game. We're going to see what everybody has learned. And if you don't get the answers right, it doesn't mean really anything. As if you get an answer wrong, you will see the correct answers. So this gives you another point to circle back around and relearn or help things to sink in a little bit better. So you're going to open up your Kahoot on your phone as another tab, whatever it is. You're going to look, okay, let me open up Kahoot on my phone. So you're going to look for this. And do you see those 4 little squares right there? That's what you're going to click on, and that's where you're going to put the pin. So I'm going to share my screen, and it will show the pin. Maybe, there we go. All right, you all should see a purple screen. You click on it, see Maritza's name showed up because you typed in. If you do not have Kahoot, that is cool too. We're going to watch the chat as well. And keep in mind, whoever wins our 2 Kahoots is going to get their name called out whoop, whoop, on the National Parents Union Facebook page tomorrow. So watch for that. So I need to make sure and remember to write down the winners so I can call y'all out and congratulate you. So we will see what you guys learned from Miss Christina thus far. And I will get everybody a few minutes. I know the first time playing Kahoot takes a little bit of time to be like, what the heck did she tell me to do? It's that you click on those 4 colors and you go 1, 4, 8, 0, 4, 6, 9. Now somebody just chatted something. It's hard for me to check chat. Maritza, is there something that we need to tell anybody?
No, she's just letting us know she's joining us in the chat. Valerie.
Awesome. Yes, totally cool too. Yep, just put either the answer may be long, just put like the color, like blue, yellow, because that's what you're going to do. So when I ask the question, what you're going to see is the question on the top of the screen, and then you're going to see colors with the answers. And on your phone, you're not going to see the answers. You're just going to see colors. So on the screen, you'll see like, oh, it's red. So you click red on your phone. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. I'm going to give everybody a couple more seconds. See if anybody else wants to play the game. All your kids are doing this, and if they're doing school from home, they're all Kahooting it up. So now you can tell them you've been playing Kahoot too. All right, we've got 4 players for game 1, and maybe we'll get more on our second game. Are we ready? All right, I got to move my little screen down. And first question for our winter boot camp. 3, 2, 1. All right, what does Federalist mean? So we've been talking about that. In red, you would click a supporter of government in which the states unite under a central authority. So you've got the central authority and the states are united. Or is that a belief that a republic can only function if it's small and independent? Those are all really good answers. Yes, I know, I kind of tricked you, right? Sorry, blue. So it's when the Federalists believe that we need somebody to unite it, but unite those states under a central authority, but the states can also have some autonomy on certain things and make some decisions as well. Very good. Oh, and then we get a little leaderboards, which is kind of fun. We only have 4 questions. This is a multi-select, so you're going to click more than one. What are the 3 branches of that U.S. government? All right. In our government, we have red judicial, yellow federalist, blue legislative, and green executive. What are those 3 branches that hold us up, right? Those 3 separations of powers. So we need one more. Oh, and we're at it. Good. Very good, everybody. You know your 3 branches. Woohoo. Oh, the board's changing up. I like it when it changes. Why are there 3 branches of government in the United States? Red, not everyone will fit in the same room, or blue for that separation of power. Very good. Yes. So we have the separation of power on purpose, right? They all meet in different buildings even. Probably because they couldn't all fit in the same room, but that's not the reason. All right, this is our last question. All right, again, another multi-select, click more than one. What are the 2 parts of Congress? So that legislative branch, okay, legislative, is it the president, the House of Representatives, the Senate, or the vice president? So this is the legislative. Very good. Everybody already knew, hopefully, the House of Representatives and the Senate. All right. I'm going to try and take a picture of our winners on the next screen. Here we go. Who is the winners? And in 3rd place is Kaylee. In 2nd place is Maritza. And in 1st place is Martha. Very good, y'all. Awesome. And thank you guys for joining us in the chat as well. I'm going to stop sharing. And we're going to have another Kahoot. So we're going to ask questions.
Thank you so much. And so we're going to go back. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was exciting to me, watching you all win and get those answers right. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, if you can see that, Maritza, can you give me a thumbs up? Thank you. Okay, Valerie, I saw your hand raised. Thank you. Okay, so now we're still talking about, again, Federalist Paper 51, because remember, that is what helped to establish our system of government, separated into 3 branches, right? And it delineated and talked about the need for separation of powers, checks and balances, right? So here we are again, back at this statement, you know, if angels were to govern men. And if you remember me reading through the Federalist Paper 51, you remember hearing that in the context of the whole paper, right? So if angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. And framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You see, I have this highlighted. I'm going to be touching on that. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next case, oblige it to control itself. The concern about any one part of government gaining too much power stems from the understanding of human nature. described in this portion of the Federalist paper and highlight it for you right there, right? There is a concern because we are people and people are not perfect, right? So how do you have a check on power so that there is no unchecked power? And so you see it reflected right here. It may be a reflection on human nature. Again, reiterating that it is a reflection on human nature, that such devices should be necessary to control the abuses of government. Okay. Go to the next one. Government as a reflection of human nature, because there are people in government. Government's not run by robots. I know some of you guys might have some of those elusive conspiracy theories and things like that. We aren't talking about that here. We're talking about the spirit and intent behind Federalist Paper 51, which establishes our U.S. structure of government, separation of powers, checks and balances, and that's what we're discussing. So government as the reflection of human nature also has to factor in the human nature. If humans were perfect and didn't do bad things, such as violate other people's rights, if there were a world that we lived in with no crime, then we wouldn't need a government. We wouldn't need a government. If angels were to govern us, they'd be perfect, right? And so if angels were governing humans, then we wouldn't need to worry about separating and dividing that power, plus having a system of checks and balances on that power. But because that's not the case, the angels being perfect, governing us is not the case. And then humans being perfect, you know, governing other humans is not the case. We have to have an established set of rules, okay? And so we see that in this, in the last slide that I showed about angels governing men. So when you hear that talk, now you know how that established the separations of power. Okay, so, and please allow me to go through my notes so I can get to the next, okay. So here we have, another one in Republican government, right? And so really looking at the word Republican, we wouldn't be thinking of it in the sense of how we have like a two-party system today with Republicans and Democrats. We're talking about the pure definition of the republic or Republican, okay? After a recognition though, let me read this, I'm sorry. In Republican government, the legislative authority necessarily predominates, okay? The legislative authority necessarily predominates. And according to what you guys just did on the Kahoot, you understood that the legislative branch is divided into two branches, subdivisions, so we could call it. So after a recognition and of the fear that Congress as a branch of government could have too much power. Remember that the separate branches want to protect their own, fiercely guard their own power. And so you have to understand that. So if Congress were to have too much power, it could have potentially become the strongest branch. Congress had to further be divided. That's why you see Congress further divided into two parts, the House of Representatives and the Senate. That's that check on the power again we're talking about, okay? And you see it right here, and the legislative authority necessarily predominates. The remedy for this inconveniency is to divide the legislature into two branches and render them by different modes of election and different principles of action, right? So you see that throughout the writing of James Madison. Okay, here you can see a visual of what that looks like, right? And so that division, that subdivision of Congress, legislative authority, we call a bicameral legislature. So the United States has this bicameral legislature. Congress right there, you see the House of Representatives and the Senate are the two subdivisions of Congress and the legislative authority, power, whatever you want to call it, bicameral legislature. And so you see the roles there within. So we have House of Representatives, we have Speaker of the House, Majority Leader, House Minority Leader. And then you see the number. So you have 435 representatives plus 6 non-voting delegates elected by population, serves for 2 years, right? Senate, upper house, president of the Senate, VP of USA, right? It shows you that flow chart. President pro tempore, senior ranking member of the majority party, 100 senators, 2 from each state, serves for 6 years. At the bottom, you definitely see that there is someone in your region that represents in Congress, either in the House or in the Senate. Interaction and engagement with that person is highly necessary to make sure that they are carrying out what you elected and what you elected them to do. They represent your community, your state, your region. You need to be asking and checking in with them to make sure that they are doing what you elected them to do. And this election is based off of population size. And so it's going to differ from state to state. Having a bicameral legislature intentionally makes it more difficult to pass legislation. The passing of laws being slower and more difficult can be viewed as a positive process, because if it were easier to pass laws, Congress could have too much power. Remember, we're talking about checks and balances, separation of power, not allowing one branch to have power over more power than the other, or to have power over the other, and how each branch can fiercely guard its own power. Okay, Congress having too much power would jeopardize the individual rights of people. So in this bicameral legislature, we call this division a bicameral legislature, like I said, dividing Congress's power between the House and the Senate. The United States Congress, or U.S. Congress, is the bicameral legislature of the federal government of the United States. And like I said, it consists of these subdivisions, the House and the Senate, okay? Uh-oh. All right, and Shea, here we go.
All right, so let's see if I'm hoping that, let me hit. All right, so what you're gonna do for Jamboard is you're going to open a second window on your computer, right? Okay, so make this screen, your Zoom, smaller, and then Jamboard as a second screen or a second link. What is the word? And so copy and paste out of the chat. That's what you're going to copy and paste to get to my Jamboard. I'm going to share my screen right now, and you can see my Jamboard. Oh, you're going to have to stop sharing real quick, Christina. Oh, let me make it bigger.
Before we start the Jamboard, okay, I wanted to make sure that if you didn't know who is representing your state, we add a link so that you are able to locate the person that is representative of your state. And so Maritza will be adding that link in the chat. You can use that, search in your region, and find out who your elected representative is that is in the Senate or the House, okay? So I wanted to make sure I announced that.
And understand that those people have offices in their district, so in their geographical area near your house somewhere, and then an office in DC. So sometimes they're in town and you can actually go see them face to face, close to you. All right, so I'm gonna share my screen. All right, y'all, this is like my first time running a Jamboard. I've participated, so we'll see how this goes. So the question is, how do you define power? And this is where we want kind of your thought process on that. You're going to click over on, hopefully I'm pointing the right way, over on your left-hand side of the Jamboard, you should see a little square with little lines in it. That is your sticky note. So I'm going to do one right now. I'm going to click on it. Hopefully you guys can see me doing it. I'm going to click sticky note and it brings this up. And then I'm going to say Shea. Really what I want you to do is your name and then your comment, right? And then after you are done, hit save and then cancel. And then you can move your sticky note around. So how do you define power? So you're going to click on a sticky note on the side, type in how you personally define power, and then add your name if you want. If you want to stay anonymous, don't add your name. Just tell us how you define power and put your sticky note somewhere on the screen so we can see everyone's thought process on that. So we're going to give you a minute because we know it's going to take a minute to think about what does she mean? How do you define power? So think about that. And if you're watching on Facebook, you think about that yourself. You can put that in the Facebook chat in the comments. You can also put that in the chat in Zoom if you're watching that on Zoom. And we will give them a few minutes.
Someone's asking if you could put the Jamboard in the chat. So the link was shared in the chat. Let me go ahead and share it again. And again, if you do not have Jamboard, you are able to just put your answer directly in the chat. There is the Jamboard link. You're welcome.
We'll give it a minute. And I hope somebody puts there something because I made this Jamboard for you. All right, Martha, it worked. Awesome. Can you make one more? Yes. Can you make one more with your thought? Oh, there we go, Kaylee. Awesome. All right, I'm going to give it one more minute, Christina.
No problem.
All right, I'm loving these comments. So the ability to influence people and outcomes, the ability to make your own choices, the ability to affect change, to have agency. And then Maritza, I'm going to stop sharing. Do you want to read some of the comments in the chat?
Sure. The comments in the chat.
Was there any?
Just one from Ms. Pruitt. She said she was having problems with the notes, but she defines power as being able to get others to join your cause.
Awesome. So back to Christina, and we're going to learn a little bit more, and then
all right.
So be ready to be quizzed.
I am so excited about the answers. And so continue to be thinking about how you define power and what that means for you throughout this discussion. We'll definitely be retouching up on that at the end. All right, back to the guided instruction. So we were talking about how the Federalist paper, sorry y'all, guided and established the separation of power, checks and balances in the U.S. Government structure, right? While Federalist Paper 51 does focus on the federal government and 3 branches, James Madison does talk about federalism as dividing power to ensure that no one government institution has too much power. And that is to include, you know, other forms of government outside of the federal and state. We're talking local governments too. There are still built in, embedded systems of checks and balances, separation of power. So you see here, in the compound Republic of America, the power surrounded by the people is first divided between 2 distinct governments, and then the partition allotted to each subdivided among distinct and separate departments. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. When we see the word republic used throughout the paper, like I said, we're not really applying that to what we know as the modern 2-party system, meaning a Republican versus Democrat. We're using the pure term or the raw term definition of republic as a state in which supreme power is held by the people and their elected representatives, in which an elected or nominated president rather than a monarchy, right? So you have other systems in other countries that there is a monarchy. They're not using a compound republic or divisions and distinct governments. You have a king or queen, whatever that may be, but that is not what is going on in the US system of government. Right here, you can see where those multiple access points of political power are, right? The Constitution being the supreme law of the land, and then those 3 branches of government, as you guys did so well answering on the first quiz. And so in our government, having 3 branches separated by power, fiercely guarding their own power, breaking the legislative branch down into 2 subdivisions to make sure that the Congress does not have too much power and definitely doesn't have way more power than the executive and judicial branch. This is what we call the multiple access points of political power, which is intended to protect minority rights from tyranny of the majority. And you can see little statements about what each one does. We'll definitely be going into that. The legislative makes laws, executive carries them out, judicial evaluates them. So we see oftentimes the Supreme Court is upholding the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, and making sure that is this constitutional or not, protecting the Constitution. So how was it that James Madison's Federalist Paper 51 had so much influence on what I would call an article, an op-ed, to establish a constitution and embed in the Constitution those checks and balances, separations of power, government structure, and various branches therein? We can see that in the Constitution we have in Article 1, the legislative branch described, right? So we see that in the US, a distinction between federal and state governments, then a subdivision of the federal level into 3 branches. We can see his influence again in the Constitution. And Maritza, go ahead and share those informational links that I shared. If you want to search more about the Constitution, I definitely advise you as an American citizen or someone that is trying to gain citizenship to at least read these parts so that you understand the various branches of government, what they do, and how they got their ability codified through the Constitution legally to do so. So here we have Article 1. Article 1 of the Constitution, it describes the design of the legislative branch of the US government, the Congress. Important ideas include the separation of powers. Again, we see that from Federalist Paper 51. now in the Constitution, between branches of government, checks and balances. You see this in Article 1 in the Constitution. The election of senators and representatives, the process by which laws are made, and the power that Congress had. We talked about the power that Congress has being subdivided into two separate branches or entities, House of Representatives and the Senate. Now you can look it up, Article 1 of the Constitution, and you can read more about it with the links that were shared in the comment field. Article 2 of the United States Constitution. This is the influence that the paper, Federalist Paper 51 had. So if you think when you're writing papers, articles, op-eds, they don't have influence, James Madison's Federalist Paper 51, along with like-minded individuals who also wrote other Federalist papers, I definitely would say go check them out, had the influence of establishing our U.S. government system, checks and balances, separation of powers, and the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution. So we can see here the power of the executive branch is vested in the President of the United States, okay? So that role is very important to, you know, be fully informed and well-informed about what the President of the United States, policies that he stands for, points of view, just different value, understanding our elected representatives, value systems, how they operate, what is their pattern in history? Do they have a proven track record of keeping their word and their promises, right? This is very important in order to protect our liberty, in order to protect our rights, right? We need to be well-informed about what each branch does, why those elected positions are important, and make sure that we're making informed decisions when we are electing representatives. So again, in the Constitution, we see Article 2 of the United States Constitution establishes the executive branch of the federal government, which carries out and enforces federal laws, okay? The president, as head of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, is responsible for implementing and enforcing the laws written by Congress, Congress being the House of Representatives and the Senate. And to that end, appoints the heads of federal agencies, including the cabinet. So if you didn't know that the President of the United States has a cabinet, an official cabinet, definitely research that. I want you to have as much information as possible to make informed decisions and to know what types of value systems people are operating under, and to understand why certain policies they, you know, institute and address, right? But what is their role? Enforcing laws written by Congress, okay? The vice president is also a part of the executive branch, because remember I talked about that cabinet, right? Ready to assume the presidency should the need arise, okay? The cabinet and independent federal agencies are responsible for the day-to-day enforcement and administration of federal law. So if you're wondering, I wonder who is responsible to enforce federal laws. Well, here you have it. In the executive branch, the cabinet and independent federal agencies are responsible for the day-to-day enforcement and administration of federal laws, right? These departments and agencies have missions and responsibilities as widely divergent as those of the Department of Defense, that's one of those departments, and the Environmental Protection Agency, another one, the Social Security Administration, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Okay, it's very important to know what falls under the executive branch, cabinet, federal agencies who are tasked with day-to-day enforcement of and administration of federal laws. Including members of the armed force, the executive branch employs more than 4 million Americans. Definitely want to know who they are and what they do. So Maritza will be sharing Article 2 of the Constitution so that you can gather more information from that. All right, here we go. The judicial branch. Boy, wasn't that a hot topic this year, right? Who's going to be in the Supreme Court and who's being appointed and what do they stand for? And what types of decisions are they going to be making, right? So it's good to know what they do as well. The judicial branch is in charge of deciding the meaning of laws, how to apply them to real situations, and whether a law breaks the rule of the Constitution. The Constitution, like I said, the supreme or highest law of our nation, the U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court in the United States, is part of the judicial branch. Their establishment and basically laws about how they operate are in Article 3 of our Constitution. So if you're looking about the Supreme Court and you want to know more about what that says, you can definitely look at that in Article 3 of the United States Constitution. Let's see. Before we go to this game, I have one more note and I don't know what happened. So checks and balances and separation of powers will protect minority rights from the tyranny of majority by the majority, okay? Reiterating why government power is divided and broken into so many parts. We don't want to be succumb to tyrannical rule. We don't want to be under a heavy arm of oppression, right? And so we have our government structure that is embedded with systems of checks and balances, protecting individual liberty and rights, and making sure that the minority is not, you know, under tyranny or oppression by the majority. And I will stop sharing, and Shea is gonna take it away, Shea.
All right, our last Kahoot. So I hope you guys are paying attention to those articles and what occurs in what article. That's what we're going to be kind of talking about. So let me screen share. Here again is your pin on those four little colors. You're going to click pin, and then you're going to put in this number and then type in your name. So it's 2490375. It's also in the chat if you can't find it. And again, if you don't have an additional, like another way to do this, you can split your screen on Kahoot.it, or you can just put your answers in the chat. We are going to see who all's going to play with me. I hope I'm not playing by myself. Oh, good. I have at least Maritza and Martha and Kaylee. Thanks, guys, for playing the game. We're trying to just, you know, keep everybody going together. Same thing that your kids are going through. I promise. They're like, yeah, teacher. No, we love you, Christina.
Valerie Pruitt is also in here too in the chat.
Oh, good. Because this helps Christina and us to know how you guys are understanding the material, and kind of breaks up our lessons as well. All right, we're going to get started. All right, game number 2. 3, 2, 1. All righty. What is a compound republic? Is that where the government has too many jobs, or is that where power is shared between the federal and state governments? A compound government. She talked a little bit about that. Good. It is where it is shared between the federal and state government. Some people think maybe the government has too much of a hand in things, but a compound government is where it's shared. That's where she talked about as well, you know, like if there's a monarchy, that is not a compound government. All right, next. Which article of the Constitution applies to the legislative branch? Is it Article 1, 2, 3, or 4? Legislative. I know I honestly, before we started doing this, I had no idea. And then I had to like look it up to make the Kahoot, y'all. So now I know more. Article 1. Article
Valerie
1.
also got Article 1.
Awesome. So this is how I figured it out. 1, like an L, like 1. Legislative. 1. There you go. That's not really 1 in Britain. That's like 2, but all right. Here we go. What article of the Constitution applies to the executive branch? 1, 2, 3, or 4. Executive. Yep, it is 2. Yep, 2. Oh, there we go. Oh, the board's moving. Number 4, last one. What is the article of the Constitution that applies to the judicial branch? I bet y'all can guess. It is at 1. Oh, it says 1 on all of them. Oh no, I did not. It is actually 3. Oh no, I think blue, y'all. Click blue. I am so sorry.
So
I did not.
So what was the answer? It wasn't yellow?
It was yellow.
It was 3.
It was
It was
3.
yellow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Three.
Miss Prue got that one too.
All right, good. It was 3. I am so sorry. I've never done that. I've been doing Kahoot since April teaching, and I've never messed up a Kahoot like that before. Sorry. All right. See who the winner was. And I'm sorry. I probably messed somebody up from winning. All right. And in 3rd place, we have Penelope Groves. And in 2nd, Maritza. And in 3rd, we have, or what first? I don't know. See, I don't know my numbers. It's Kaylee. Oh, thank you all for playing again. I'm sorry I messed it up.
All right, that was fun, nevertheless, right? And so I see a comment in the chat that this is a great history lesson. Thank you very much for coming and participating in it. We're so glad that you're here. So let's start again. And the games are exciting. Me just watching them is just getting me excited about it. Right. All right. Okay. Let's see. If you can't see it, then if you cannot see it, then you can leave me a comment in the chat. But I think I got this tech stuff down now and we're on a roll. All right. So right here, you know, I want you to ponder what this is saying, okay? We're not going to have a question about this. It's a thought that I want you to take away from here. Remember, I talked to you one about power and then the other one about justice, okay? So this is the one about justice. So Federalist paper, in what we read in that large context of the whole paper in the beginning, in that, James Madison talks about justice is the end of government, the purpose, the goal, you know, that's what that means, the word end. It is the end of civil society. It ever has been and ever will be pursued until it be obtained or until liberty be lost in the pursuit. So justice, the purpose of government is to establish and achieve justice. We see that talked about right here. All right. So power, we were talking about power. Defining, I'm going to give a textbook's definition of what power is. Power is the ability to do something or act in a particular way, especially as a faculty or quality. The capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events, move or travel with great speed or force. And so in that sense of power, it is describing energy, right? Describing energy. So I have a task because I didn't want to have all of this wonderful information shared and then not provide a personal responsibility or task that you can do And that is these questions. I want you to answer these questions. You do not have to answer them today. Again, this is the first part of a 3-part series. And so definitely when you leave, I want you to either journal about it, just start really thinking about it, talking to other people about this, and just see what answers you come up with for yourself and through others. So the first question is, who should have power? Who should have power? Next question being, for whose benefit should this power be had? For whose benefit should this power be had? And the third question being, at whose expense should this power be had? Okay, so we started out asking, I gave the definition of power, and most of you guys answered it in the beginning in the Kahoot. Who should have power? For whose benefit should this power be had? And at whose expense should this power be had? Now I am going to turn it over to my lovely sister Maritza to do announcements. Take it away, Maritza.
Sorry. Hello, everybody. I hope all of you truly enjoyed this presentation. And I said this yesterday and I said it again. This is like a mini civics class. So just imagine, parents and viewers, if your child was able to get this, not just in high school, but start beginning to learn about government and how power is acquired and how power is yielded, starting from kindergarten all the way through to the 12th grade, to better prepare them to be able to make the decisions that will affect the rest of their lives as far as elections, which occur every 6 months in this country. Please join us this January 7th for the National Parents Union Family Clapback. I'll be putting the National Parents Union website on here. Once you get on there, you'll be able to register. For those of you that are interested in being a member of the National Parents Union, also, please go onto the National Parents Union website, www.nationalparentsunion.org. It is free. The membership is free. It does not cost you anything to become a member. You'll be able to receive workshops like this very informative one on a monthly basis. You'll be able to reach out to us if you have any questions. Just feel free to send an email to info@npunion.org. I'm typing it right now in the chat. If you have any questions about what you learned today, if you have any questions about who in your region represents you, that is already a part of the National Parents Union as a delegate, please reach out. This was very fun being here with you on behalf of myself and these two lovely ladies. I thank you very much.
And so right now we're going to, and thank you, Maritza. And so, for all of you who attended, again, we will be offering some surprise incentives for answering those questions this week. And at the end of this 3-course session boot camp, you're going to get a nifty valued person. We're going to give you a certificate of completion. As you can see, our information is right here. You can reach out to us, or like Maritza shared, the info@npunion.org. But right now I'm going to open up this time for any questions that you may have in the audience. If you do not have any questions, then I will see you again next week, same time. And I hope you have a very Merry Christmas for those of you who celebrate it.
Happy holidays. Happy Kwanzaa. Feliz Navidad. Happy Hanukkah.
All right. And so with me seeing no questions, I will excuse you and we will see you again. Work on that responsibility piece about power and share this information. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.